Vancouver Canucks and this upcoming offseason. If there is a whiteboard in the office of Patrick Alvine and Jim Rutherford and it says to-do list, number one has to be create cap space in Vancouver. What's the most likely way you think they do that this summer?
Yeah, so it's really interesting, right? Because I was having this conversation yesterday on Canucks Conversation with my good pal Chris Faber, and what we were talking about was that LA Kings trade, right? Like that LA Kings trade came, at least in my opinion, as a direct result of the news from Commissioner Gary Bettman that the cap is only going to be going up a
Yeah.
minimal amount. When there's another minimal cap increase, that's when teams who are having these conversations, I've had this confirmed by a few different people. There's been a lot of conversations, excuse me, that alarm. There's been a lot of different conversations going on kind of behind the scenes. But what teams were waiting for was, okay, well, if it's going up by 3 or 4 million, we're not going to make this trade, right? So does that trade happen? Like the Kings wanted to get Gavrikov, they want to have some cap flexibility. Does that trade happen if there's a cap increase of about 4 million, which is what a lot of people thought we were going to see with the escrow debt being paid off in October, or set to
Mhm.
be paid off shortly here? No, I don't think it
Yeah.
does. And with that in mind, for the Canucks, if that increase had happened, the Canucks, yes, they still would have been in salary cap trouble, which is hilarious to say that they have the worst salary cap situation of any team in the league, given where they've been in the standings the past few years. But yes, it would have given them some flexibility. Is it enough to make them not have to make a Connor Garland trade? Because I think that's the direction that this is going, guys. Is look, Connor Garland's a pretty good player. There's been talk of Chicago wanting to move up in the draft. Do they want to go after a guy like Matthew Wood with the 11th pick, a guy who played with Connor Bedard here in North Vancouver? Look, there's a lot of different options, and you kind of look at it, and I think the only option for the Canucks to trade down would be with the Chicago Blackhawks. So does Chicago want to bring in a guy like Connor Garland and pay next to nothing because they have what is now the most valuable asset in the league, and that is cap space. The Chicago Blackhawks have that cap space. They can give up other assets in order to bring in a player that they like that they might otherwise have to pay a pretty penny for. They're going to get him for next to nothing. So, it's not a great situation for the Vancouver Canucks, but they've put themselves in this position, right? Like nobody held a gun to their head and said you have to extend JT Miller. Nobody said you have to sign Ilya Mikheyev. Nobody said you can't flip Andrei Kuzmenko for an asset at the deadline. Nobody forced them into these moves that they've made, so now they have to deal with it. This was always a real possibility. We know with the memorandum of understanding that this was always going to be something that teams had to keep on their radar. Look, I think with this news that the cap's not really going to go up, I think we're headed toward a Connor Garland trade personally.